There's no hill we can't climb. There's no mountain too high for us now. There's no reason to hide. Just like the stars.
Hi guys, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. Today we have an in-studio session that I'm so excited about with a guest that I have asked to do this about a while ago, but she's gotten brave. She's excited to be here. Her name is Cassidy, and actually she's a part of the Hills family. She's more recent, newer with us, but on our leadership team and already making such a tremendous impact. And like I talked to you about on a lot of episodes, I feel like life has a way of really throwing people in each other's paths at the right time. And Cassidy will be able to elaborate a little bit more on how we got to know each other and meet. But without further ado, Cassidy, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. And, you know, I feel like this is going to be really powerful for the listeners because we spend a lot of time talking to, guests on different things, trauma, addiction, and sometimes those things kind of interweave and mingle. And Cassidy really has quite a layered history that I will let her explain. And we kind of thought about this episode and how we wanted to do it, and we want to do it a little bit differently. Cassidy, I'm going to have you kind of introduce yourself and just tell the listeners maybe a little bit about your story. I think we agreed we're going to save some of that early childhood and beginning stage stuff for maybe another episode. But you're going to tell us about some traumatic things that have happened to you and really how you've gotten through that. But without further ado, you go ahead and tell us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. I'm really happy to be here. So again, my name is Cassidy. I have been an esthetician for about 4 years now, and it wasn't something that I always thought would be on my trajectory, but I kind of found myself in this path. So starting off, I kind of want to start off around like the 15 age. Is that fine with you? Okay. So with that, at that point in time, I had just gone through some traumatic events in my family, and was just trying to figure things out on my own. And with that, I kind of found somebody that I thought was like, I kind of made them almost like my addiction, so to speak, where it was like my first love. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like my person. I think he's like the one, whatever. You always think that when you're 15.
Yeah.
You're like, they're the best person ever.
I think you think that later in life.
Yeah,
too.
you think it all the time. And you're just like, but with that, it was something where it was just like, I didn't have any basis to know what a toxic relationship was. And then now reflecting back on it, like it was the most toxic relationship I could personally imagine, for at least in my own past. So with it, I was like struggling myself with a lot of self-harm and alcohol abuse. So I was already not in a good headspace. I had seen counselors, didn't really like them, thought that they weren't actually helping. I'm like, I have no issue like finding what's wrong with me. It's very clear. I'm thinking about it every day. I want to like work through it. And with the person that I found, like he was always like really reassuring, was like, no, like we can like work through it together, and kind of like built himself up to be this like pillar in my life where I'm like, you're my best friend. And you're the one, like you were like my, almost like my God, which is like so gross to even think about now. But we were together for a while. Before that, we were like best friends, and he had a girlfriend, and it was just some weird things. It's like he had liked me before, and they started dating. And then we drank a lot one day, and he tried to take advantage of me. We were at my house, and he like had forced himself on me, and it was this big whole thing. I ended up pushing him off so that like there was no like full physical, and with that, we went to school the next morning because like we had school. We were still like, I was still sobering up because it was like 4 or 5 a.m. when that happened. And he just like continued drinking through school. Literally, he like blacked out, face planted into the principal's office, got expelled. But then he twisted the story and told his girlfriend at the time that I was the one that came on to him. So it was this big old thing. She had like tried to come at me. And what's funny is like we reconciled now after it because we found that we had like a common denominator after down the road. And it was just something where I'm like, even after that, I still didn't see that there was anything wrong with it. I'm like, well, in my head, I'm like, well, I liked him. So him doing this, obviously there's nothing wrong with it. Like I had never done anything in that way before him. So I was like, oh, this is just what it is, whatever. Obviously this is normal. And then goes on, like he goes out of town, whatever. We started dating a couple months later because he had broken up with his girlfriend, and I thought like my life could never be better. Like I was like on cloud 9, I was turning 16, thought I was thriving, and like I continued drinking and like all of that, and it was just a really dark place. And then he started getting like more violent. He would think that like I was cheating on him, and I remember one time very, very vividly that like we were at his friend's house, and he and his friend like got into it because he thought that I was like going to be with his friend. I'm like, no, like literally we were just talking about like how you're not being a nice person, and he thinks I should leave you because it's not healthy. And he like punched. There was like probably like 6 inches or like a foot. This is a foot. About a foot from my face. He like literally just like punched a hole through the ground right next to my face. And I'm just like, I'm still like super drunk. So I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now. My parents don't know because I was the entire time, they were like super strict growing up. So like they thought that I was just at a friend's house because all of that. So it was just a whole thing. And it kept going on, and circling back because I kind of didn't go over this part, which we'll go over too. But throughout all this, we did end up having intercourse, and like from the jump, it didn't feel right for me, but I had nothing to base it off of. So he was like, oh, it's normal, it's fine, it's okay that it hurts, like everything's fine. And he did some really weird things now, like looking back, that like I'm like, yeah, that's very predatory behavior. Like you were my age, but you were definitely like grooming. And like just like continuous, like he did it throughout the entire relationship. I mean, we dated for a long time, so I would say like I want to say we were actually in a relationship for a little over a year. And I didn't actually know like until all of that, like he had cheated on me throughout the course of the relationship. The girlfriend, like it was 2 girlfriends before me. I always thought that he was gonna like cheat on me with her, and he actually did. And then he got together with her after, so I was just like sandwiched between this girl. She's great. Her and I are friends now. It's really funny. But it was just like this thing where I'm like, okay, like you've cheated on me with all these different people. So that caused its own little level of trauma. And then down, like after we finally like he broke up with me over the phone, it was a whole thing. A couple years later, I went to a therapist, and she was just literally going through her intake. It was our first thing. And she was like, have you ever been like in a situation where you were like having sex and like you like it wasn't consensual? I'm like, okay, like what do you mean by that? Like I don't really know. And she's like have you said stop? And people haven't stopped. I'm like, well, yeah. But like I was in a relationship, so that doesn't count, right? She's like, no, it does. And I'm like, what? And then she's like, yeah, you've been raped. And I'm like, oh, okay. So so that was like, and I was in a different relationship. Like this is literally like I think it was 2 or 3 years had passed, and I was in a different relationship at the time. And what's ironic because the person I was dating at that time broke up with me the same day after I had found it out. So it was just like, yeah, it was just like stacks on stacks of just like, okay, this is why I don't trust, like not even just like men, just people in general. I'm like, this is why I got trust issues. And it's just like looking back on it, I was just continuously felt really, really, really uncomfortable about it. And it continued to get worse because, I mean, I don't know why I did it, but I ended up in a relationship with somebody that was like, I had, when him and I had broken up, I cut off everybody in that circle because I'm like, it's just not safe. And then slowly but surely, I started bringing them back into that circle because I'm like, they were my family, like I had, so to speak. And I started dating somebody that like he knew and that I met through him, which that guy had his own issues. It wasn't anything like physical wise, but because of them being like friends, even though I told him that like of what transpired, and I was like, I want you to know, like this is like we cannot be in the like same proximity together, like this is not okay. He actually brought me to see my ex to get like verification that it was okay that we dated. So like I had to see my abuser in person. Why I did it, I don't know. And I'm just like, I had to like sit next to him, and it was just like the most like disgusting thing. And ever since then, I was just like so scared, and he kept like trying to pry his way back into my life. Like there was like this secret folder on Facebook that I found in messages that's like the ones that like Facebook doesn't want you to see. They're like blocked messages. And I guess he had been trying to contact me for a couple years that I was unaware of, blissfully. And and I'm just like, okay. And he continued trying to do that through my boyfriend at the time. And like my boyfriend's like, I don't understand, like, why don't you just like reach out to him? He seems like he's like really like he's really sorry about it. I'm like, he doesn't even know, like, because I didn't want to confront him because I was scared, because he had like very, very deep anger issues, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I went the route of like, it got so bad that I was going to try to press charges, which is when I had reached out to a couple other girls that he had previously been with, and the same thing had happened to them. So I ended up trying to press charges. It didn't end up really, I didn't continue pressing them just because I went over it was like the statute of limitations, and it would have just been a whole thing. So I still have like the case, but I never like continued to press charges on it. But the worst part is I'm like, I still feel guilty, because I'm like, I know he's like, from what I've heard from people that like I used to be friends with at that time, he's still trying to do it to girls that are underage. Like now, like he's like my age now, so he's like almost like 25. And he's still trying to do it. And I'm like, it sucks. I'm just like, I wish I would have known so I could have stopped it then. But yeah.
That's awful. I have a lot of things that I'm thinking, and I'm trying to think of which one to start with. But I guess, first and foremost, I guess I'd like to know where your mind was at when you first started dating him. And that moment when he's telling lies about you and showing up drunk and acting like that at school, getting expelled, starting issues for you with other people. What makes you think that you want this person still? Tell me about when you access that part of you. What do you think was the driving factor in why it wasn't enough to turn you away?
I think that it was like, it was just some part of me where it was like, I don't even know if I was imagining it because of the movies or what, where I was like, oh, like this is just part of it. Like we were still meant to be together. Like obviously he's treated me this way. Like we have our history. It was a short history, but it was still a history. And I'm like, we can overlook it because like I love him. I love him more than a friend. Like I love him as like who he is, for what he is. And like I could see past it. He's just going through it right now.
Was he someone that ever apologized about all these things that he would do? Like in that scenario, you guys continue to be friends. He's putting the moves on you. Is he, I'm so sorry for what happened. It's always been you. Is there anything like that in that moment? And then how about the times when he is forcing himself on you and you're clearly not wanting it, but he's taking it anyway? Tell me about both those.
Yeah. So for the first one, there were like some apologies, but they were never, it was like the grazed over ones where they're just like, they're kind of gaslighting, or they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, but like with a but afterwards. Yeah. And then definitely right before we started dating, because he wanted to be able to like acquire. Yeah. And he actually had said when we were, which is even grosser, when we were dating, he's like, he liked to take people's virginity. Like he was like, it was like almost like a tally of people that he was doing that to. So it's just disgusting. And later on with the trauma portion of it, he would not always he would apologize, but he had apologized sometimes. And I think that's why even to this day, sometimes it's hard to be like that it was full-fledged like rape, because I'm like, he still said sorry afterwards. And that's something that's always been hard for me to work through, because I'm like, he was my boyfriend at the time, and I thought that like, oh, maybe he actually was sorry, maybe he didn't mean it, but like after how many chances? But then knowing that he did it to somebody else, that was kind of the validation that I needed, where like, if like we can't all just be having the same experience, like it's obviously an issue. So
it's crazy how you said like the acquiring, and it's just so mind-boggling that there are these people out there that like to do things like that. Listen, there's horrendous things people are doing, from molestation of small children, murder, all the things, right? And I think one of the reasons I do this podcast is to obviously shine light, but also like the darkness that exists. And I'm constantly like reminded of how beautiful human beings can be, and then how horrific they can be. And so much of that comes like from our environment and what we grow up in and what's taught to us. And you have to think, because the whole time I'm listening to you, it's like I'm feeling your pain and grief and what the footprint and impact it's had on you, but I'm also thinking, like, who is this monster? And because at the end of the day, one of the ways I've been able to work through my own molestation and abuse is that hurt people. And so the whole time you're speaking, in the back of my mind, while I'm thoughtfully listening, I'm also thinking, like, what happened to him, you know? And like, why does he hate women so much? And why is this a game of acquiring and taking and hurting, and the pain so dark and awful? But I heard you when you said, like, you felt this guilt. And it's like, unfortunately, it is what it is. Like, hopefully there's going to be someone that does something in the near future, if he is in fact, doing that with underage people. But you did and coped with the situation as best you could. And the reality is, you didn't even know what was going on half the time. And a lot of it is all a mind game. So that leads me to my next question is, you didn't know what's going on when you broke up. So it sounds like this relationship was kind of off and on again, 2 years cheating in it. But how did you make the final break from him, and what did that look like, the interactions that you guys had?
So he actually did it to me. So yeah, I know. And that was like the saddest part, because I was not okay. Because like, I was still so like in love with him, and like I don't know how my blinders were on so far, because I think that's why now my tolerance for things is just so low. I'm just like, no. Like, because of going through that, like, he had like literally it was a scenario where like we had just had our anniversary, my dog died, it was my birthday, and then he broke up with me over the phone while he was in Walmart. Yeah.
Wait, you just had the anniversary. Your dog died. And then you're in Walmart.
No, he's in Walmart.
He's in Walmart.
He was in Walmart.
And you're where?
I was just at home.
And he called you from Walmart and said what?
That he was breaking up with me. And like, I don't even remember now what it was. I kind of blacked out a little bit. I did not say nice things. I remember my sister actually got mad at me, because she was like, he's a nice person. And I, like, in my gut, I still knew that he wasn't that good person. She also didn't know that, like, the extent of like that he cheated on me the whole time. So it was something where I'm just like, wow, like, that's what it was. And then it took a while for me to get over him too. Like, that was the sad part. Like, while he was with that other girlfriend, like, I was still very much so in like my abuse stage of like abusing alcohol.
Well, listen, I'm gonna interrupt you, because somebody said this to me the other day, and it's really been sticking with me. It's a trauma bond.
It is a trauma bond.
I was having lunch with my friend, and I was complaining about my own relationship issues, and she was like, it's a trauma bond. And I'm like, holy shit, it's a trauma bond. But it is, you know? And at the end of the day, like, it makes perfect sense, because there's all, like you said, the grooming, the methodical parts of this toxic relationship, and you weren't expecting it. So of course you're going to feel that way. Oh my gosh, it's so despicable. And I think because, I care about you, I'm getting upset now. I mean, I get upset when anyone's in pain. But, okay, so how did you start to heal? Tell us that. Because, listen, right now there's a listener listening to this and saying, they've gone through something similar. Maybe a lot of people that listen to this podcast have been in abusive relationships, and maybe they ended it, but they still have all those feelings trying to draw them back in. Yeah. And so while it might have taken you a while, what were some things that you did to work through that? Because the woman I know today is super strong and in a very happy, good relationship. So before we get to that, though, just tell us, how did you start to get better?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of it was going to therapy. So I did start going to therapy. It didn't go as regularly as like I now would have wanted myself to back then. But I went enough. And I feel like the weirdest part that kind of got me out of it was working. Like I just dove headfirst. Like I had a job at that point, but I dove headfirst into like having like an actual like career, so to speak. Like I was like working at Discover and I was just like living my best life. And that was my point. But actually what like kind of knocked me out of like abusing alcohol, because I think that was my coping mechanism for a long time, was me getting hit by the drunk driver when I think I was like 18 at the time. And because of that, I was just like, no, like, I guess this was like my sign of like, God does want me here. So with that, I just kind of like continued pushing on and just diving really headfirst into like self-help. Read a lot of self-help books, and just like continued pushing towards that part, but not to like, I had some unhealthy parts where I was like doing too much self-help, where I'm like, it's just self-deprecating at this point. But now to where I am like today, I just did a lot of therapy and a lot of self-help and working through it.
Let me ask you this. Did you, they have some sayings. I could get in trouble for this, but I'm feeling a little frisky here. Sometimes they say, you know, you get over someone by getting underneath someone. Not saying that's what we should do. We should all, you know, preserve ourselves. But did you have a rebound? How was it like? Ooh, answer this, because did you like fall right away into some unhealthy relationships, or did you stay clear of people? What did you do?
Oh no, I fell like face first into a lot of unhealthy relationships. Like also another part was I had, and like let me preface this by like, if you're taking antidepressants, I am not a doctor. You do what you will, what's best for you. But I was prescribed ones that were not good for me at the time. Oh. So some of the like memories are very scattered because like had me on an upper, downer, and a stabilizer. So I literally don't remember. But all I do remember is that I was very manic a lot. So I had like some very risky behaviors where I was just like never like really like the hardest drug I ever did was weed. But I just was. Yeah, I was not exhibiting the most upstanding version of myself for a while. And then like the way that I kind of would stabilize myself was by getting in a relationship. But I noticed a pattern of I was always with somebody that had substance abuse problems. Like looking back now, every single person I've been with has had some kind of substance abuse problem.
Well, I have a few things to say. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, what Cassidy is saying is that you are allowed to make mistakes. And sometimes I like to say 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward. And we're not like at all. People misrepresent themselves all the time. People trick us, and, you know, we can only do our best to judge what's going on with others. And it's okay if it takes you a while to figure yourself out, life out. It's a never-ending process. But it's crazy because I feel like the woman that I know is like, you know, honestly, guys, Cassidy is on her shit. And she is just like a machine when it comes to work, doing her due diligence, you know, very impressive human being. And so I think a big reason I do this podcast is to show people that are struggling, like, we don't just wake up and be perfect. Not that you've thought that at all, but like it takes a lot to get up and do the right thing, and we make mistakes and people fall down, and it's never about falling down. It's about getting back up and then trying again. And I think, I don't know, I relate a lot to that, and it's just hard to pick good relationships sometimes. I think it really is, especially because I feel like you and I have similarities in like, I want to see the best in someone. And I always am trying to find that, and then it can cause you to justify things. But I know that you said that you were hit by a drunk driver in 18, and then, you know, you were kind of like, had like a reality check. You were kind of toggling before that back and forth with, yes, diving into work, but also exhibiting some of these kind of not so healthy behaviors. Tell us a little bit about like what you did to kind of, I guess, officially. Was it like, boom, you got in that accident and then you never touched a drink again? Or how did it go for you?
So it was more so I had a stronger boundary of like, I don't want to be the one that's like drinking and driving. Because at that point I was like before that I was like, I don't care, like drinking and driving, like as long as I can walk in a straight line, I'm good. I made it. I can talk well. And then with that too, I feel like that the car accident was also around the same time where like my mom started exhibiting more of her alcoholism. So I think that they kind of went hand in hand, and like that helped me grow up a lot faster, because then I started having more of like almost like a resentment for alcohol, where I'm just like, I don't want it. And like I had talked to like my counselor before about it, and I was like, do you think that like because my mom's an alcoholic, like my grandpa on my father's side was an alcoholic, do you think it's safe for me to drink alcohol? And she's like, well, I think that if you can like go a week without drinking, you should be fine. You should be okay. And I felt kind of weird about that. I was like, I mean, like I was never like, I never got the shakes or anything, but like I had a thing for going kind of like, so dare I say, balls to the wall, so to speak, where I'm just like, if I'm drinking, I'm doing it to get drunk. Like I'm not doing it just to like feel fuzzy. So it was something where I'm like, I know that part of me, and I know that that's a cause for concern for me personally. So like every time that I would have a drink, I would feel like that undercurrent of like fear. And sometimes I would drink to suppress that fear, because I'm just like, because I wanted to feel like almost like normal, because I felt weird not being the one drinking. And now I'm like, I don't care. I'd rather eat a lot more food and save the calories.
For sure. Well, tell me this. How did you, now you're in a healthy relationship. You're married. How long have you been married?
My watch is dead, but about 6 months.
Okay. And everything I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet. I do look forward to that day. But everything I've heard is nothing but positive. And obviously we all have our struggles. So I don't really want to get into, because we're going to have you back for another episode where we can talk more about addiction and all of that. But tell us a little bit about how you knew that this was going to be a healthier fit for you, because sometimes some of the listeners think I'm broken and I'll never attract or pick the right person, or they have some internalization of I'm not lovable, I'm not valuable. How did you change the script on that?
Yeah, so where I was at that time when I did meet my husband now, was in a really broken place. I like kind of slipped back into self-harm. I had like not done it in a long time. And I had reached out to like one of my old friends who's now in AA. And I was like, hey, do you know of like any self-harm type meetings? Because he was telling me about his meetings and how much they helped him. And he's like, well, I don't really know many like self-harm ones, but like, why don't you just start going to meetings with me? So I started going to like AA meetings and like Koanon meetings, and I felt at home. Like I knew that like I may not identify as an alcoholic myself, but I always just like felt like that was like my place, like my people, like they didn't judge me for like my past or like what I was currently feeling. So because of that, through like literally through connections of going to that meeting, one of my friend's friends was Thomas's roommate. So we ended up like meeting through friends, which was really funny. And I was not very nice when I met him. Like he tried so hard because he like liked me from the start. And like at the point that he met me that night, I had literally just gone stood up on a date, and I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm like totally fine being a single cat mom. I'm thriving. Like I'm good. Like, so it was a struggle for him. Like I feel so bad because like to this day I was like, wow, I was really mean, because like I was just not very nice about some things. And it actually came to the point where like we're friends for a couple months, and my mom had hit a point where like she got hospitalized because of her alcoholism. And he was one of the ones, like I didn't really reach out to anybody about it because I didn't want them to know, because in my family it's kind of like a we don't talk about it type thing, even to this day. And he was one of the ones I knew I could, because I'm like, he understands better than anybody, and he was the one that was there for me. So we literally were just going to like not even a date, we were just hanging out because I needed somebody. I went up to my parents' house and stayed with them for a while to help watch my mom, and he just like showed that he could show up at that point. But it's still been, even like to this day, I still have like just like an underlying current of like the what ifs, because I still think that like it's almost too good to be true, which I know it's not. I know that's just like my fear speaking. But I feel like at least at the state that I am now, that's something that I just need to continue to work through, because I just try to talk myself out of it. I'm like, no, he is a good person. He's not who you have been in relationships with in the past, and like, he's not lying to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because I can relate to that. I guess, I don't know. I haven't had that picture perfect relationship, or not even picture perfect, but like super where, oh shoot, is it too good to be true? I haven't had that. Someday soon. But what I related a lot to is like business for me, because even when things are going great business wise, and as we grow and take new locations, like I kind of always feel that same way. Like, is this too good to be true? Like, you know, like, I don't know. It's just exactly what you said. Like, also just self-doubt, and I don't know. But I think that it starts to go away over time. And I'm so happy for you that you're in that relationship and that you have that safe place in a person, because I do believe we all deserve that. What would you tell a listener that is right now in a similar situation, or some kind of, you know, relationship abuse, maybe even recently got someone that's endured some of the same things that you have? What would you tell them? Like, what would you like to transport into them right now?
Yeah, so I would say if they're currently in the stage where they're actively in that relationship, I would just want to share with them that they do have the strength to get out of it, and that it is not normal to be in that type of situation. That the feelings that they're having, if they are having fear, like, they are valid feelings. And if whoever's traumatizing them right now is trying to like squash that, there's a reason they're doing that. Is because they want to keep them there. So I would just say, like, continue to be strong and like do your best to just get out of it, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just need to find it.
I love that. And who is Cassidy today? Tell us who you are today, and maybe a couple of habits that you keep to kind of keep you grounded, centered, and on this path that you're on now.
Yeah, so I would say today, one of the things that I pride myself on being is very honest, because of the behavior that I had previously exhibited. I can't even tell anything close to a lie. So I like to be honest, and I want to be the friend that I like felt like I never really had at that point. So I always do my best to just be present and be there for everybody that I can be, and just really help people find where they want to end up and try to help them get there too. And then a couple things that I do in my daily practice to kind of help keep me grounded is pray every night with my husband. That's something that we did like literally from the start of our relationship. And I feel like it's something that I never really I did it growing up, but I like during the childhood trauma, which we'll talk about a different day, I kind of created like a severed bond with God. So Thomas is kind of what brought God back into my life. So just doing that, I feel like it's like the pillar of it. Exercise. I haven't been able to do it as much lately, but normally exercise is something that like people always tell you like it will make your like mental health better, and it does. Like I was totally against it for a while. I'm just like, no, I just want to be lazy and watch some Netflix.
Yeah.
But seriously, it really does transform your life. And then always wear your sunscreen. The esthetician in me will come out. You just wear your sunscreen, please.
I love it. Well, thank you, Cassidy, for joining us. To the listeners, Cassidy's, like I said earlier, just a joy to be around. And yeah, you know what? You bring kind of that grounded feeling, whenever you're around. I feel that way. So I'm thankful and grateful for having met you and having you in my life, and certainly for being able to share your story with our listeners. So for those of you just tuning in, you picked a great episode to start with. Cassidy, thank you for being on this episode. Guys, if you want to follow us, find out more, watch more of our videos, you can find us on April Hill on YouTube, also on TikTok, Instagram, and then our website is abuserecoverysuccess.com. Catch up with us and stay tuned, because we have some great episodes around the corner.